Mark 8:1-8 says, and I'll paraphrase, at about this same time, he again found himself with a hungry crowd on his hands. And he calls the disciples together and he says, this crowd is breaking my heart. They've stuck with me for 3 days, and now they have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they'll faint along the way. Some of these people have come a long distance. His disciples responded, what do you expect us to do about it? Where are we going to buy food in the desert? He asked them, he said, how much bread do you have? 7 loaves was the answer. So Jesus told the crowd to sit down in groups on the ground. And after he gave thanks, he took the 7 loaves of bread and he broke them into pieces and he gave them to the disciples and told them to hand them out to the crowd. They also had a few fish, and he pronounced a blessing over the fish, and his disciples gave them to his disciples also to hand out. The crowd ate until it was full, and 7 bags of leftovers were collected. There were well over 4,000 at this meal. Now, myself, and I'm sure most of the people here, have all trained ourselves very well to avoid becoming hungry. I personally try to eat at least 4 meals a day. And it's pretty easy because we can get 24-hour delivery. Like I can get a pizza delivered at 3 o'clock in the morning. If Amazon has its way, I'm going to be able to get tacos delivered by a blimp to my door. I'm all for it. Most of us, though, really have never been hungry. Not really hungry. We've never been days without food. Some of us have not been hours without food. We start to look for in-between meal snacks. And, well, I'm thankful for the fact that in this nation, people are taken care of. For the most part, other than in severe examples, most people don't have to worry about actually being hungry. Not really hungry. I am concerned, however, that our lack of physical hunger has seeped into our spiritual walk. I watch as people go weeks, months, years, and in some cases decades without a new touch from God. And they're not panicked. They're not even concerned. When is the reality that if we go 1 minute without experiencing God, we should fall apart? We should panic. We should be desperate to get back to Him. When does that reality set in? You see, the people in our story, the people who were hungry, had a supply issue. They were hungry, and they lacked anything to fill their hunger. They didn't have any means to deal with their hunger. They couldn't, like the disciples said, where are we going to buy food for these people in the desert? They didn't have money to buy food even if there was a place to buy it. But the real problem was there was no supply. There was no way for them to get food. Our issue is not a supply issue. We have more praise, more preaching, more resources, more learning, more teaching than any generation that has ever walked the planet. Our issue is not about supply. We like to claim that it is. We like to say, if I could just get one more word, if I could just find an anointed praise team, if I could find a cooler church to go to. I'm here to inform you that there is still a God who is always there, and that grace is still sufficient for you, that His presence is still accessible to you. Your issue is not an issue of supply. Our issue is that we don't place any demand on the supply of God. We simply have not because we ask not. See, the Bible turns it all back on us. The supply is for sure. God is always there. He has everything we need. The supply issue isn't diminished or taxed beyond its ability to supply. We're told that those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they will be filled. So I'm convinced that we don't have a lack of righteousness available. What we have is a lack of hunger. Those folks were so hungry for time with Jesus, for one encounter with Jesus, for just a moment with Jesus, for just a touch from Jesus that they followed him for 3 days and didn't notice that they didn't eat. They paid no attention to their physical needs because they needed Jesus so bad. Yet we can't stay 15 minutes after church because we're hungry. We start getting the shakes. Our physical need overpowers our spiritual need. Our schedules are not controlled by encounters with God, but by physical needs. Our schedules are controlled by food and activities and trips and jobs that dictate our life. They set our calendar. They decide how we spend our money. And so our hunger level has gone down. The demand is so low that the supply that is available goes completely untapped. And we were warned that this would happen. We were warned that it would happen in Philippians chapter 3. Philippians 3 and 15 says, so let's keep focusing on the goal. Those of us who want everything from God that God has for us. If any of you have something else in mind, something less than total commitment, God will clear your blurred vision. You will see it yet. Now that we're on the right track, let's stay on it. Stick with me, friends. Keep track of those that you see running this same course, headed for the same goal. For there are many taking other paths, choosing other goals, and trying to get you to go along with them. I have warned you of them many times, and sadly, I'm having to do it again. All they want is easy street. They hate the cross. But easy street is a dead-end street. Those who live there make their bellies their God, and all they can think of is their appetites. How many blessings, how many breakthroughs, how many miracles, how many healings, how many spiritual encounters are missed, forfeited, and lost forever due to a lack of demand, due to the fact that we are not hungry. We've not forgotten the promise, have we? Ask and you shall receive. No, but it's on us. Ask and keep asking. See, sometimes we ask one time, but if we don't get a response, we just move on. If it requires too much time, if it requires more than an hour on Sunday, or if it requires tarrying or interruption of my plans or discomfort or fasting or extended prayer time, then we're not really interested. Because we're not really hungry. Because we have really no demands. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if church isn't a marathon that we aren't hungry. I'm talking about an attitude. I'm talking about a complete lack of expectancy. I'm talking about being okay with not seeing, with not feeling, with not hearing, and not touching God. The length of our service does not denote the depth, but I am calling you to hunger again. Apathy has overtaken our appetite. Jesus saw their hunger and he responded. And maybe Jesus doesn't respond to us because he doesn't even know we're hungry. Jesus is looking for and watching for the hungry. He goes out of his way to find those people and to feed those people who are hungry. He is literally moved forcibly to those people that are hungry. Maybe if he isn't moved on your behalf, the problem is that we haven't placed any demand on his supply. Maybe our problem is that our need is no longer evident. We are so obsessed with convincing everybody, that we've got everything all together. With proving to everyone that we don't have any needs, that we don't lack anything, that maybe Jesus isn't able to see our needs either. We've slipped into a que sera, sera type of attitude. Whatever will happen, will happen. I'll just show up late and not be prepared, and I'll put in no effort on my part, and if God moves, that's fine. And if he doesn't, that'll be fine too. I really don't believe anymore that we live and move and have our being based on spending time with God. That's not how we are. We've decided that we can live without him just as well as we can live with him. We've moved into a survival mentality with our Christianity, and we've called it abundant living because apathy has become comfortable. You bought a lie that survival was sufficient and that a taste was all he had for you, when the reality is that if you were really hungry, we would find a way to move God. If you were really hungry, you would find a move of God that is pressed down, shaken together, good measure, pouring out, running over. He's just looking for a group of people that are hungrier today than they were yesterday. When one taste is just not enough, one touch of Jesus is just not enough. Although it's significant, it is not enough. I will hold on for, I will believe for, I will demand more. He still fills a place. Every time he fills a place, there's leftovers. Look it up in the Bible. Every time Jesus dealt with physical hunger, every time in the scripture he deals with somebody who's hungry, there's leftovers. Because Jesus was always more than enough. There is more than enough to go around and then some. That is the day I'm looking for. That is the blessing I'm declaring to you. More than enough. God pours out more than enough, so much so that there's leftovers. I'm not going to be satisfied with getting filled today and then living on crumbs forever. The Bible said, manna for today and fresh manna tomorrow. Enough manna for today, but tomorrow, new manna. My assignment today is to make you hungry. I declare that apathy has to go. Are you hungry? So hungry that you're willing to push past the normal? So hungry that you will wait, that you will ask, that you will keep asking until Jesus has to move? So hungry that you will praise when nobody else praises? So hungry that you refuse to go even though everybody else is going? So hungry that you won't sit through one more service where everybody just goes through the motions. So hungry that you refuse to allow 1 minute at an altar to satisfy you anymore. Are you making a demand on his supply? See, there was a woman with an issue of blood who wanted him so bad she got on her face in the dirt where the animals walked and crawled. And she touched his clothes and she put a demand on the supply. I'll tell you, there was so much Jesus, but when she touched him, she needed him so bad that he felt it, that the supply was diminished for just a second. 2 Kings 7:3. We got 4 lepers sitting outside a gate. They said to each other, why do we stay here until we die? I mean, we could go back into the city, but there's no food in the city either. So let's go over to the camp of the Armenians, and we'll surrender to them. And maybe they'll spare us, and maybe they'll keep us alive, and maybe they'll kill us, and maybe we'll die. And at dusk, they got up, and they went to the camp of the Armenians. And when they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there, because the Lord had caused the Armenians to hear chariots and horses and a great army. And they said one to another, whoa, whoa, whoa. These Israelites, they hired the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come against us. And they got up and they fled in the dark. And they abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys. They left the camp as it was and they ran for their lives. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp and entered the first tent they found, and they ate and they drank. And they took silver and they took gold and they took clothes and they went and they hid them. And they returned to the next tent and they entered and took some things from it and hid them also. And then they said to each other, whoa, 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 what we are doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let us go at once and report it to the royal palace. Desperate measures reveal people who are desperate. These 4 lepers were overtaken by hunger sickness. They were sick of being hungry. Until you come to a point that you are so sick of less, so sick of a partial healing, of a partial breakthrough, of a partial victory, so sick of partial freedom, you will remain partially bound, partially challenged, partially broken out, partially sick, until you get out of that mindset. They became so sick of hunger that they conclude that they could either sit there and die, or they could get up, try something, and probably die. They came to an important moment, and a moment that every one of us has to come to. I'm dead if I do, and I'm dead if I don't. Famine is in the land. It isn't that people don't know about God or even about spending time in his house, because there's plenty of people going to plenty of churches. The problem is the simple fact that hanging around God isn't having any impact on their walk. It isn't having any impact on their attitude or on their habits or on their relationships. It doesn't have any impact on their finances. There is famine outside the church too, though. Crazy people shooting strangers. Economic destruction everywhere. Prescription drugs abused to mask the pain or the fact that there's no hope. So we are surrounded by famine, and we find ourselves in the same situation as the lepers. We can sit here and die, or we can get so desperate for nourishment, so desperate for change, so desperate for a move of God that we will get up and do something, that you will get up and do anything. You can either sit here and die, or you can take a chance that somebody might ridicule you, somebody might make fun of you, you might fail, you might even die. But it's got to be better to die trying something. What reveals how desperate you are? Does your worship reveal how desperate you are? Does your calendar reveal how desperate you are? Does your giving reveal how desperate you are? Is there anything in your actions, in your attitude, in your life that says, I am desperate for God? Get up and do something. We can sit here and embrace death and throw away any hope. We can wallow in despair, accept starvation, or instead we can get so desperate that we do something desperate, something only a desperate person would do to get a touch from God. See, the proof of your desire is in your pursuit. So what are you proving by what you're pursuing? Right. Singing about being hungry doesn't prove you're hungry. Talking about hunger doesn't prove you're hungry. Even church attendance doesn't prove you're hungry. It's what happens in your heart when you sing about hunger. It's your desire when you talk about your hunger that matters. It's your expectation when you arrive at church that reveals that you're hungry. Your actions prove your hunger or your lack of hunger. Let desperation increase, because desperation drives God. See, the lepers must have had great earth-moving, earth-shattering faith. No, they didn't. They didn't even talk about God. You know what they had? Absolute, utter desperation. That's all they had. They just had desperation. Hunger brings harvest. Willingness to step out and chase God brings about something the enemy can't plan for and can't fight against. You see, that day, 4 lepers reaped in a field they didn't sow. Sound familiar? It should, because that was your promise, that you would reap in a field you didn't sow. You've been asking God to respond to your praise. You've been hoping that he would respond to your faithfulness. You have been depending on God to respond to your gifts. But I'm telling you today, God responds to hunger. When someone is willing to risk everything, when someone becomes so desperate enough to step out, that's when God steps in. These lepers had no idea that what they were going to do would work. They had no clue. They were just, all they knew was it was the only chance they had. When are you going to stand up and do something? When are you going to prove that you're hungry? See, the vessels of all of these unlikely miracles throughout the Bible are unlikely characters. Lepers, outcasts, sitting at the edge of the city because they're not allowed even in the city. We may not be the brightest and the best. We may not be the strongest or the slickest. We may not be the bravest. We may not be the most gifted or the most gorgeous. However, I would trade the brightest and the best and the strongest and the slickest, the gifted and the gorgeous, for somebody who's desperate. Because I know that desperate people get the attention of God. I'm not sure that your gift can get his attention, but your hunger will. What do you have to lose this morning? Do you have other options? When the doctor says, I can't help you anymore, do you have other options, or are you going to get desperate? When the finances just don't work, do you got any other options? Because if not, get like these lepers. Get up and do something. I'm not sure that my eloquence can turn his ear, but I'll tell you, a cry of help in the darkness always will. See, going to Jesus was never pretty. A woman with an issue of blood crawled in the mud. Blind Bartimaeus, we like to say, he called out for Jesus. No. He wailed in the streets because he had no other option. Jesus, have mercy on me. Four friends carried their buddy on their backs up a ladder to a roof where they pulled the shingles off and then busted the roof open with their hands because they were desperate. Not because of faith, not because they were great, not because they even knew for sure Jesus could heal them, because they were desperate, because they had had enough. Your strength will not impress him. But when weak, desperate people call on the name of God, he will remove an army, destroy an obstacle, change a sickness. He will do anything to arrive on the scene in behalf of a desperate person. You just have to get desperate. When's the last time you were willing to get on your face in the mud just to touch him for a second? Because some of our situations are more desperate than that woman's was. Some of our children's situations are more desperate than those men carrying their friend. When's the last time you were willing to stand in an altar and wail, Jesus, have mercy on me? Not because you knew he would respond, because you had no other choice. It's time for the church to get desperate. It's time for the church to get a hold of God. It's time for the church to do something. Because doing nothing isn't going to work. Being proper is not going to work. Being strong is not enough. God is looking for desperate people who will do something. Are you not sick enough yet? When do you get there? When are you sick enough that you would crawl in the mud to get to him? When? When has the time come that now is enough? When will we get there? If it's not now, I don't think it will be ever. I don't think you'll ever be sick enough. I don't think your family will ever be broken enough. I don't think your finances will ever be messed up enough. If it's not now, when? When will you do something to get to God? Because if you reach for him, if you call for him, if you're desperate for him, if you need him, he's always there. I can assure you that when you cry for him in the nighttime, he's there. I can assure you that when you're knocked down, he'll pick you up. I can assure you that if you get down on your face here today, you will cause a draw on his spirit that he will feel and that he will respond to because he has to. It's time that somebody got desperate. You're not going to impress him by coming to church more often. You're not going to impress him by giving more money. You're not going to impress him by reading your Bible more or by looking better next Sunday. You will impress him by doing something, by reaching for him, by get a hold of him. Somebody here needs to get a hold of God right now. Jesus is looking for some desperate folks right now. See, desperate folks don't need music, and they don't need an invitation. Desperate folks don't need somebody to tell them or to urge them. They know that I can't do this anymore. I can't leave here the way I came one more time. I will not do it. Jesus is here, and he is so capable. And he is saying, challenge me. Reach for me. Try me and see that I am good. The promises of God still work. I believe the reason we don't see the results the disciples saw is because we're not as desperate as those people were. Because we think we've got it all together. I don't know any other way to impress him than to just get completely desperate. Jesus, help us. Jesus, help us. I'm telling you, if you don't have the Holy Ghost and you're in this place and you want it, don't leave until you have it. Get desperate for it. And if everybody else leaves, I'll give you my key. Don't leave until you have it. Say to God, I am not leaving without my healing. I am not leaving without your spirit. I am not leaving without a touch, because this is the only hope I have. This is the only chance I have. This is it. Today is all there is. And maybe I'll make a fool of myself, and maybe I'll reach the enemy's camp and they'll still be there. But I won't be any worse off than I am now. Pursue after him. Chase him. Chase him down. Take him. Whatever you pursue is what you desire. Somebody needs to go after him. Chase after him. Jesus, yasara rohoto koria sananai reata, hoto koria salabrahatatai, yasananai rohosalahatai. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Shalalala rohosatai reatai. Shataya rohasana rohosatai reata. Are you sick of being hungry? Are you sick of being sick? Are you sick of being depressed? Are you sick of living in the situation you live in? Are you sick of coming to church without your spouse and without your children, without your friends? Are you sick of it yet? Because it's time that somebody got desperate. Somebody didn't care who was looking or what was going on. Somebody that didn't care. Because they realized, this is my chance. Survival can no longer be sufficient. Survival can't be enough. 1 minute with God on Sunday or 2 minutes with God on Sunday won't be enough for me anymore. I need manna today and new manna for tomorrow, every day. One taste won't satisfy me. One touch won't be enough. Are you sick of your addiction yet? Are you sick of it? Are you sick of being dependent on alcohol or cigarettes or drugs or pornography? Are you sick of it? Then get desperate and get a hold of God, because today He will break it. Today He will take it. There is healing here right now, but it's only available to the desperate. There's freedom here today, but it's only available to the desperate. There's provision for the desperate. If I have not convinced you, then that's all I can do. But Jesus is saying, I am here for you. Reach for me. Reach for me. Jesus, Jesus, hallelujah. Lord, I praise you for you are holy. Lord, I praise you.